Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Graphic Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Panel, and today's episode is a big episode. Obviously, we are doing a comic book today. We are going back to Marvel, diving right back in, but today we are diving into the Ultimates comic line. Obviously, they're redoing the Ultimates now, but the Ultimates were basically just an alternate timeline. They wanted to basically write stories for these characters without having hundreds and hundreds of years of stories that have already been written, kind of holding them back from doing what they want to do with whatever character they want to do it with. So they created this universe to kind of give them a clean slate, and then they did a whole bunch of shit to kind of ruin that, and then they ended up killing the universe. But I think there was a whole bunch of good in that universe. I enjoyed a lot of the stuff. I enjoyed a lot of the Ultimates run, which were that version of the Avengers. I did enjoy a lot of the Ultimate Spider-Man and then the Ultimate Miles Morales, obviously. We got Miles Morales out of there. I enjoyed the Ultimate X-Men. I'm reading that actually right now along with the Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm rereading that right now. And then I really, really enjoyed, this is probably my favorite out of all the Ultimate comics, what this episode will be about, which will be the Ultimate Fantastic Four. I thought this was really, really, really fucking cool. This was kind of like a darker, more scientific horror approach to especially the introduction of their powers, which I thought was so freaking cool, especially reading it when I was younger. But this episode will be on the Ultimate Fantastic Four and the first 6 issues of the Ultimate Fantastic Four. And I'm thinking next week we'll be doing a similar thing that we do with the manga and be doing the following 6 issues of the Ultimate Fantastic Four. Mainly just because I think that'd be really cool. I really, really, really like the Ultimate Fantastic Four. It was probably the first Ultimate book that I read completely through. Spider-Man would probably be a close second. And then I'm actually, for some reason, I've never actually finished the Ultimate X-Men. I'm rereading that right now. But I only ever read the first 20 to 30 issues. I never read that far into it. So where I am now, which is on book 7 or 8, I'm going to just keep going and hopefully finish it for the first time, which will be exciting. But it has nothing to do with this. This episode is about the first 6 books of Ultimate Fantastic Four. So let's get going right into this breakdown. Alrighty, so we're going to jump right into breaking down these books. Obviously, we're going to start with the first one. I did want to give just a little bit of background. Obviously, I did a little bit in the introduction, but the Ultimate Universe is obviously a separate universe that they made because they had a whole bunch of continuity that was kind of holding them back from things they wanted to do and or stories they wanted to tell. So they created this universe so they can tell and or do these things without fucking up the original character. They really ended up working out like they wanted, and the Ultimate Universe basically ended up going to hell. But there was a lot of really good stuff in it, including the Ultimate Fantastic Four. I think the Fantastic Four was probably, obviously it was still very similar to the originals, and after we break down these 6 books, we will compare the original comic run a bit to the Ultimate run, or at least the early stages of both. But this is one of the ones I really like because they kept obviously the same characters and relatively the same story, but they changed a lot of the aspects of it. They made it very much more of a scientific horror kind of story. They made the characters very much younger. They're all just about early 20s, which is kind of makes you connect with them a little bit better too. They did a lot of really cool stuff. Obviously, it's in the Ultimate Universe and it's a reboot in a way of the Fantastic Four. Like I said, it's just another universe that they created because they didn't want to fuck up the stories they already had, basically. The beginning of the book, we are introduced to Reed Richards. Obviously, we know Reed Richards from the original Fantastic Four run, one of the smartest men in Marvel Comics. We meet Reed Richards as a teenager. Originally, he's already shown to be a super genius working on advanced experiments. His main focus at the moment is a teleportation between dimensions, a machine to do teleportations between dimensions. Another key person that's introduced in this early chapter is obviously his best friend Ben Grimm. Ben Grimm, like everyone knows, obviously does end up to become the Thing. The Thing is probably my favorite Fantastic Four character. I have, weirdly enough, for my Fantastic Four figures, I have probably through two, I think maybe three, I think two sets of Fantastic Four figures, but about four different things, or have had about four different things. I don't think I actually still have most of the things anymore from moving and moving and moving. I lost a lot of my figures within my last, over the last year. Thing is absolutely my favorite. But this first chapter does a very good job at introducing, even at a young age, Reed is interested in discovery and science. It is also really cool for them to show them being best friends. Obviously, they mentioned it in the original story, but they showing how them at a young age and them being best friends and close friends is cool, especially when we see them grow up later on into the story. So, and obviously with Fantastic Four being one of the oldest Marvel comics, that's even more of a good one to do a thing like this, like a reboot where you can not have to worry about the old stories, or at that point almost 100 years or so of at least 60 to 70 years of continuity that would be behind those characters already. They can kind of just do a fresh start and tell their own story. And I really liked a lot of the stories they told. I think obviously the Ultimate Universe eventually kind of just went to shit, but I think the Ultimates was fun. I really liked the way they did the Hulk in that. I thought the Ultimate Spider-Man was decent, at least in the beginning. I thought that the Ultimate X-Men is absolutely Fantastic Four is probably my favorite. Ultimate X-Men's number 2. All of these have been pretty decent. I think the Ultimate Universe is a hidden gem, obviously because we didn't get as much out of it as we eventually expected. We forget how much of decent stuff was actually in there and that we got from there. Obviously, we only really kept Miles Morales out of it, but anyway, back to the book. This moves us to the next chapter. The government finds out about Reed Richards' experiment to teleport stuff between dimensions. He attracts attention from the government think tank, which is in the Baxter Building program. Obviously, we know the Baxter Building from the building in the original Fantastic Four continuity that they lived in. We get introduced to Sue Storm, a brilliant and confident woman. Johnny Storm, a rebellious douchebag, honestly. He's just Sue's younger brother. Obviously, we know these characters from the original continuity. They're a bit different and a lot younger here, but they're all recruited as young prodigies to continue on with whatever they're trying to do in the Baxter Building, or whatever they were already working on. Like Reed, for example, continues on with his teleportation thing. They are building a machine to access another dimension called the End Zone. The idea is basically to be able to sense something to another dimension and or take stuff back from another dimension. This isn't random science, it's very much a controlled dimensional travel. This version is more grounded in sci-fi than the classic origin. This is a very much more of a science story. Obviously, the Fantastic Four have always been more science stories, but this is very much a science story. They get much more into the science behind everything, and much more into the science after everything goes down. So it's very, very much more a science-focused book. In part 4, we will be introduced to Victor Von Doom. He's obviously the ultimate version of Dr. Doom. He's wealthy, arrogant, and highly intelligent. He joins the project but clashes with Reed, clashes with just about all of them. He secretly sabotages things out of jealousy and ego, sets up the main villain early. Obviously, if we've read Fantastic Four comics, we know that Victor Von Doom, Doctor Doom, is one of their most baddest villains. Not only theirs, but just one of the most badass villains in comics in general. One of the most powerful, so them introducing him very early is a good idea. This finally leads us to the experiment. This is the way they did. So obviously in the original, they went to space and blah, 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 blah. Ended up getting, I think it was like a radioactive storm or something of that nature. They got struck by it, got caught in there, and that ended up getting the powers from there. Obviously in this, it's an experiment gone wrong on Earth in the desert. The team activates the teleporter. Something goes wrong. There is a huge explosion. Victor's interference destabilizes the system. This is obviously the origin moment of their powers and kind of the origins of the characters. for this universe. After the accident, each character changes. Obviously, they change into the characters we know them as. Reed Richards becomes the Mr. Fantastic. His body becomes elastic. Sue Storm turns invisible and can produce force fields. She becomes the Invisible Girl, or the Invisible Woman, I guess it could be, whatever you want to call her. Johnny Storm can burst into flames. He becomes the Human Torch. Ben Grimm transforms into a rock-like monster, obviously becoming the Thing. Their powers come from exposure to the end zone energy, or come from exposure from the end zone energy. One thing I think they did such a good job on is making the Thing's transformation hit a lot harder than it does in the original. Specifically because he is mad at Reed Richards like he realistically would be for ruining his life, basically. Obviously, Ben becomes the Thing. He's stuck as a monster permanently, feels betrayed and angry at Reed. This version hits a lot harder emotionally than the classic version, just due to the anger and hostility that he feels because of losing his life, basically. Not dying, but losing his life that he lived. Victor also transforms. He becomes a metallic, powerful being. Different from the classic, his powers are much more energy-based and scientific in this, rather than mystical, rather. He's less of a sorcerer in this than he is just a powerful being. And then obviously he becomes the main thread. This leads us to the first confrontation. Well, actually, before I get to the first confrontation with Doom, I do want to mention Mole Man. Mole Man I did kind of skip by it, it wasn't super important, but after the events of the explosion and everybody getting take place, the Invisible Woman was kidnapped by the Mole Man. He was a teacher at the Baxter building before he got fired for creating basically these, like, they kind of look like clay face, these like monster things that are basically just made out of plants. He ended up kidnapping them and taking them to the basement, or to the underground, and we found out that he was watching over the Baxter building still. I did want to just mention that because that is they ended up fighting this like giant lizard thing that he created. I did want to mention that because I don't want you to think Dr. Doom was like the first thing they ever did, but Dr. Doom is the first big thing that happens. It's roughly also, so this is really weird. So I went out and bought the first 6 issues of the Ultimate Fantastic Four last week, and that's what made me want to do it this week. And I read all of them. I bought all those last week, but I had previously read them, and I read it on the Marvel Comics app, and the Marvel Comics app separates them into 20-page issues, 20 to 25-page issues. So when you go back and like read them, like I used the actual books to take notes on everything, and I combined it into like 4 different things. So I have like a whole bunch of notes, and then if I actually go back and jump into like the 6th book of the Ultimates on like the Marvel Ultimate app, I have like they're just past the explosion. They're like still trying to rescue Sue in the underground. They haven't even introduced Dr. Doom back yet, or shown anything with him. That was, I think, book 7 or 8 on the Ultimate thing, and then it wasn't all of the fight and stuff with Dr. Doom though ended up being in the actual first book for the printed book. I don't know if that's always how that's like that. I don't know if the ones I bought were like compendiums of some sort, but I did think that was a bit peculiar. So when I say we're gonna do the first, I said we're gonna do the first 6 books, we're actually not going to, because that's probably going to take like hours upon hours. I was thinking when I bought them that it was going to be up until the point where they're under the ground and stuff. It's not where it is. Obviously, just off of where we are now, we're already to the Dr. Doom fight, which starts, I want to say, at book like 7 or 8 or 9 on the app. So realistically, we're just going to be doing 3 of the actual things. We're going to be doing the Dr. Doom. Let me look. We're going to be doing the Dr. Doom, which is from issue 7 to we're technically in here, we're already over. We get the introduction and then all the way to the end of the fight with Doom, which is issue 12. And then the next big thing is the End Zone, which is a couple part series. We'll also be doing that. I want to say that's 5 or 6 parts. but I could be wrong. Yeah, it looks... Yeah, there's 6 parts to the End Zone, so we'll do those, which takes us all the way up to issue 18. And then we'll do the Think Tank, which is called the next little story arc, and that's another part issue. It would be 1 part, 2 parts. That's only a 2-part issue, and that's probably where we'll end for the thing, and then we'll go over the differences between the original Fantastic Four and the rest of them. I wasn't really aware of that when I started recording this. I didn't actually break out the books. I just bought them a couple weeks ago and ordered for this, because instead of taking notes, I was just going to go directly out of the books. And we're going to stop at Think Tank mainly because after that is a crossover with X-Men, and I don't want to jump into that quite yet, so... But go back to what we were on. Like I said, this is their first confrontation with Dr. Doom. The team faces Doom. They struggle to control their powers. Still not fully a team yet. They're very much not working together, not working as a cohesive unit. This is much more chaotic than a clean superhero debut that you would normally expect to see. They're very much having trouble kind of struggling and not even sure if they're going to be able to pull this off. They very much try to fight him, each of them one-on-one, and they all end up losing. Eventually the team does start to fight together. Very, very messy at first. Reed Richards tries to think strategically and adapt as Sue Storm uses her force fields to protect and control space. Johnny obviously is a bit of a hothead. He just attacks aggressively with fire. Ben Grimm goes head on with brute strength. At first, they're not coordinated at all. They're kind of just doing anything all of them can think of to do to try and win this. This is when Reed realizes that Doom's powers comes from the same unstable dimensional energy that their powers comes from. That energy isn't fully under control. It's able to be manipulated, and you cannot easily lose control of it. Meaning that Doom is very, very, very powerful, but he's also very, very, very unstable. They exploit Doom's instability. They keep pressure on him from multiple angles, force him to overuse his power. His own energy begins to work against him. It's less they overpower him and more they push him until he loses control. Finally able to break him almost. This is where the teamwork finally starts to click. Sue contains attacks with force fields. Johnny distracts and pressures. Ben keeps him physically engaged, whilst Reed coordinates everything kind of behind. This is the first moment they act as a real team, and it's the first time it's really going right for them. Doom is very much overwhelmed. He is unstable. His unstable energy spirals out of control. He's either contained or focused out of the fight, or forced out of the fight, rather. Sorry, depending on your interpretation. The key is that he's stopped. He's not defeated forever. Obviously, Dr. Doom, their biggest bad, is going to be back. He's actually not going to be their biggest bad for the Ultimate run, but that will be coming later. It's very important to remember, though, especially for this issue, that they don't win because they're stronger. They win because Doom is unstable, Reed is smarter, and they finally start to work together as a team, as they should have from the beginning. Start to trust each other. Simple answer, they stop Doom by working together and exploiting the instability of his powers, forcing him to lose control rather than overpowering him to beat him. I think this was a very cool way for them to do it. Obviously, a big thing with Fantastic Four and then just team books in general is obviously working as a team, and it being the biggest reason why they can do as much as they do. So them not being able to do really anything until they start working as a team, I think is a really cool way of showing that. By the end, they begin accepting their new identities and they start working together as a group. This is the birth of the Ultimate Fantastic Four, the real birth of it. Kind of the first time we see them as these characters. Obviously, this story is important for a couple different reasons. It modernized the origin story. It introduced the Ultimate Universe versions of the characters. Obviously, these characters will interact with the other Ultimate Universe characters later on, so it's pretty cool. It sets up Dr. Doom as a central villain, and it focuses more on a science and consequences rather than the superhero aspect of it, which I think is a really, really cool way to do it, especially like the scientific horror aspect of it. Always thought that was it really interesting. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, That leads us directly into the End Zone saga. This is technically leading into the End Zone saga. There's another End Zone saga that's a couple books away. This is kind of just an introduction to the area. The End Zone saga is a 6-issue, well, the original one is a 6-issue series, or a 6-issue arc, rather. It stretches from Ultimate Fantastic Four, number 13 to 18. Obviously, I updated what I was saying earlier. We're not doing the 6 books, we're just doing the first 3 story arcs. We're going to start with issue 13. Reed starts to detect mysterious energy readings from another dimension. He believes it's proof of a parallel universe. This is a relatively big part because this is kind of the first time we see Sue completely on, like, I don't think this is a good idea kind of wave compared to Reed. Sue Storm is very cautious. She thinks Reed is rushing into everything. Ben is already tired of being a lab experiment, so he's kind of just ready to do whatever needs to be done to get back to his original body, obviously. And then Johnny kind of just treats everything like an adventure, so he's not really too worried. He's just kind of up for it. Reed is very much obsessed with discovery, and he starts kind of ignoring risks. Obviously, like we saw with the End Zone in the original one, and then with them going, or in them, obviously in them fighting Doom, then after that going to find Doom. That was another unnecessary risk to them. It's kind of the first real hit that Reed's curiosity is becoming very dangerous, becoming kind of a thing that seems to be is going to be causing trouble. This will lead us directly into issue 14, which is kind of his first contact attempt with the other universe. Reed builds a prototype gateway device. He tries to communicate with the other dimension. It does end up working. Something responds. Not clearly, but something is definitely there. The tone of this story is very much, from this point, kind of shifting from straight up a science story to a cosmic horror story. This will lead us into 15. Reed increases the power of the device. A partial breach opens, leading to strange shapes, energy distortions, and possible living matter coming out of that breach. This causes Sue to want to shut it all down. Ben thinking it's a terrible idea, also wanting to shut it down. And then Johnny just still kind of being curious of what's going to happen, what's going on. Reed continues to push forward anyway, despite them wanting to stop and or their concerns. This is the moment Reed crosses the line. He values discovery over safety. This is very much different from the character that they've developed so far, but for him to drastically jump past that point is kind of a big thing for his character. Shortly after this, the breach becomes unstable. Creatures begin slipping through. The creatures, they're not fully visible. They're aggressive and alien, seem to exist differently than normal life. The team end up needing to fight them off inside of the Baxter building. This kind of very much shows that this isn't really even exploration anymore. It's an invasion of risk. It just keeps coming. Every single thing they do, it seems to be raising the odds and raising the risks of something malfunctioning and or just going wrong in general. This will lead us directly into issue 17. Reed officially names the dimension the End Zone. What we learn is it's a hostile universe, possibly collapsing or broken, full of predatory life forms. This is kind of where Reed decides he wants to end up going inside to explore himself. Obviously, the team's not necessarily on board. Sue Strong, like she has throughout, strongly disagrees, is against it. Ben refuses at first, but he's kind of talked into it, given the point that this will help them understand the everything that happened to them better, to go back so he can get his life and his body back. And then Johnny's just excited. He doesn't really understand what's happening, in my opinion. But this will lead us to issue 18. I'm not actually necessarily going by the specifically what happens in each order. I'm kind of breaking down the part. I gotta just stop saying each issue 18 and blah, blah, blah. But I'm breaking down the story leading to when they go to the End Zone, and then when they get into the End Zone, I'll kind of break down what happens. Reed perfects the portal. The gateway becomes stable enough to travel. The team argues, is this science or is this suicide? Obviously, there's a lot of risks going along with this. It's not like they're just can do whatever they want. They have to be as safe as possible, but obviously they are going into the complete unknown. I mean, Reed knows what he's studied about it, but until they actually go in there and get some hands-on experience, they'll only really know so much. But the team reluctantly agrees to proceed. They are about to enter. The team reluctantly agrees to proceed, and they enter the end zone. Obviously, when they were originally reaching into when he was first trying to talk to the people, obviously he was getting contact with somebody. It wasn't like clear or anything. We don't know who it is yet. This is when they get there is kind of when we get introduced to this character. Obviously, we get introduced to Nile, short for Annihilation, I'd imagine. This happens right as the end zone story fully kicks off, right when they get into it. Nile is a ruler type figure in the end zone. He is a massive insect-like alien. He's very fucking creepy looking. It's kind of like think about it like an armored fucking human size. Like, it's the creepiest fucking look. He commands swarms of these gross looking creatures. He embodies the idea of consumption, decay, and survival. Thinks of himself less like a person and more like a force of nature with intelligence. He's going to be alive for millions and millions of years. His world is dying, and he's going to outlive it, and he wants to go to another world. That's basically his whole get thing. His first appearance, obviously, like I said, is the end zone entry. The team arrives. When Reed Richards and the team enter the end zone, the world feels dead and alive at the same time. Strange structures float in space. Creatures move like parasites. It's a very, very weird world. The laws and the way the world works in their universe completely out the window. Everything is gone. So it's a very, very different situation. At first, Nil is not clearly seen. Instead, the creatures kind of act with purpose, like something is controlling them. It's kind of hinting at the fact that there is an all-powerful being there almost, rather than just somebody else. Obviously, this does a pretty good job building mystery. There is something in charge out here, but we're not quite sure who or what it is yet. This is when we get the first real glimpse of Nil. The team is attacked by waves of creatures. During the chaos, we briefly see a huge shadowy figure observing them. The design, he has very long limbs, an alien, almost skeletal insect body. Not fully human in quite literally any fucking way. This moment establishes Nil is just another monster. Is not just another monster, rather. He's watching and thinking. He seems to be much more of an intellect than just some creature. Shortly after this, Nil kind of reveals a bit more of his intelligence. The attacks are not random anymore. The creatures coordinate, trap the team, and attack strategically. This confirms that Nil is controlling them like a hive mind almost. He's kind of think about it as his brain is kind of controlling every single one of their bodies. Eventually, Nil is properly revealed. He is the dominant entity of this region. The creatures are extensions of his will. His nature is not emotional like humans, driven by hunger, control, expansion. He doesn't hate the Fantastic Four. He sees them as intruders or resources. Basically, I can't leave this part out. So when they first get there, basically Johnny's sick. We find out that it's a whole bunch of science, like actual science and big words and shit behind it that I don't really understand, so I can't explain it to the best knowledge. But basically, he's kind of like a reptile. He has to shed his skin every once in a while, and he had to shed his skin because he used it too much doing the flame on. So Johnny was out. Miss Invisible was with her. Ben and Reed were on the ship talking to Nile, and Nile broke their spacesuit helmets so they can breathe. Reed covered his up with his hand, and Ben, obviously, he doesn't really have to worry about the toxic fumes or whatever because of his anatomy. So he didn't really have to worry about it. So this is kind of just where the assault starts. He kind of shows his true colors here. This leads us directly into the conflict with the Fantastic Four. Eventually, as all these people end up fighting, the not Invisible Woman, Reed, and Ben end up fighting with Nile and his goons. Johnny ends up waking up and goes in there and starts to burn through swarms. Nile directs a full assault attack on the team. The team is very overwhelmed. Ben Grimm struggles against sheer numbers. Sue Storm focuses on protection, but none of it matters. The creatures just keep coming. no matter what. Reed starts to figure it out. He realizes that the creatures are connected. There's a central intelligence, nil. The strategy is don't fight the swarm, escape the system, controlling it. This is survival, not victory. I know where these stories go because I ended up reading a whole bunch more of these, but I don't think they actually hinted at in the book itself that Doctor Doom is also in the end zone somewhere. Obviously, Doctor Doom's relationship with the Fantastic Four, we know. The Fantastic Four focus on escaping. Nil continues sending waves and creatures. Kind of the moral of it is that you don't really defeat or escape him. They just really survived him. When they get back to Earth, they end up going through the thing. They land in this, I think it's Las Vegas, they end up landing, like on the road. And then Nil and his big monster come down under them. And then at some point, Nil and Reed Richards are fighting, and Nil's talking, and Reed puts a plasma can, or a pistol in his mouth. He ended up trying to grab it and basically shooting himself in the face. And that was the end of Nil, at least as far as we know so far. I think Nil is relatively important for a couple different reasons. Obviously, he's different. Nil isn't relatable. He isn't human. He isn't understandable. He represents the universe as something hostile and uncaring. The end zone itself, obviously, Nil is basically the living embodiment of the end zone. Endless hunger, endless adaptation, endless threat. Obviously, Reed's actions in this book were really fucking dangerous for a couple different reasons. Specifically, by opening the portal, Reed Richards didn't just explore the end zone, he legitimately exposed the Earth to the beings and all the dangers of the end zone and Nil itself. The bottom line is Nil is terrifying because he's not a typical villain. He doesn't monologue or scheme, he just exists to dominate and consume. He turns the end zone from a cool alternate dimension into pure survival horror. He very much just saw the Fantastic Four as a piece to get to the next step of his puzzle, which is fucking kind of wild. But that will lead us directly into the final part of, or the final arc, I guess, for lack of better, that we're going to do. This is called Think Tank. It is from issues 19 to 20. It's a relatively short issue, but it's a very different villain from any of the ones we've seen before, and I think it's a really fucking cool story. And it's a bit shorter, so I figured why not just toss it on the end of it. So let's jump right into Think Tank. That will lead us directly into the last comic arc that we're going to be doing for this story. It'll be the third real comic arc in the Ultimate Fantastic Four. Like I said earlier, we are continuing this next Monday with the continuation, the next 3 stories in Ultimate Fantastic Four. I don't want to spoil anything, but the next one is fucking insane. One of the craziest ones in Marvel Comics. So I'm really excited for that. But this one is called The Think Tank. This one's a very different story. The villain is very different than any of the villains we've seen previously, and any villain really that we see after this. So in the way she kind of spoiled that to she, but the way she kind of breaks down the team is so fucking crazy. These 2 books are truly some of the craziest books that I've ever read, and I'm really excited to jump into it. So let's get going. Like I said earlier, Think Tank is issues 19 to issue 20. Only a 2-issue little mini story. Nothing too crazy. We open up issue 19 in Reed's past with a flashback. Reed is a child prodigy, already smarter than adults, emotionally disconnected from the other kids. Obviously, being that much, with that amount of knowledge comes a certain level of maturity, so also that mature for such a young age, I'd imagine it would make it very difficult, in some cases impossible, to connect with most, if not all, kids at your age. So when you think about this character, you definitely would think about him not necessarily having the largest friend group in school. I guess you could think about it as like the really nerdy kids in school times like 17. Obviously they're like really smart about certain things, but this guy is literally the smartest man like ever. He has trouble slowing his mind down to think like a normal human being, so to be going to school with him probably isn't the easiest thing to do. And then the flip side, going to school being him in a world full of people that just could never really understand you the way you know what's going on, is probably hard. He is recruited into a government-funded brain trust, the Think Tank. The Think Tank concept is basically a program that gathers the smartest young minds in the world, future scientists, engineers, and innovators, all into the Baxter building. Basically puts them all under one roof to, realistically, the idea behind it is to get weapons for the military, but that's not necessarily their open idea. Their open idea is really, obviously, to create scientific breakthroughs. Reed at the Baxter Institute, Reed meets other geniuses, but none are quite like him. Even here, this is kind of important, even here that he feels very superior and alone. He is not. Even at a place that has the smartest minds in the world, he is so many leagues above them that it still doesn't feel like anything. Which has got to be a crazy fucking way of just feeling and thinking. Reed's personality growing up doesn't necessarily change a lot into his adult years. He's cold, logical, socially detached. He doesn't connect emotionally, care about normal life like other people his age or other people even above his age with normal IQs or normal brains, for lack of a better term. This is kind of where Ultimate Reed differs from classic Reed Richards. In many ways, he's not just awkward about how he thinks, he is very borderline inhuman in how he thinks. It's almost like nobody really can connect to him on that level, because there's not another human being that could see it that way. This kind of sows the seeds of danger. The early signs that Reed doesn't think in terms of right and wrong, thinks in terms of, is it possible? Which obviously is a very dangerous way of looking at things, especially for a scientist with his funding and then his brain. He quite literally has the ability to do almost anything he wants, so that thinking is definitely a dangerous way of going about it with that power. Obviously, this mindset leads directly to things like the end zone experiment that basically got us the Fantastic Four that we know, or know in this universe. Back in the present, Reed is still obsessive, distracted, focused on bigger ideas than the team. The team dynamic's a bit different. Sue Storm is worried about him. Ben Grimm doesn't trust his judgment. Johnny Storm doesn't take it seriously. He's very much has not taken anything seriously this entire book series. This is one way before we get to it, that I will kind of point out that the Johnny Storm very much has not changed at all since from the Ultimate Comics to the normal comics. He's a bit younger, but he realistically acts just about the exact same and the exact same character, so I did think that was kind of interesting. A lot of the other ones are about the same, but relatively have these bigger differences or bigger flaws. Johnny's just kind of Johnny. The team seems like they're starting to lose faith in Reed. That's very much how it feels coming off the page. Deeper into the think tank, more flashbacks appear. Reed outpaces everyone intellectually. Even the program leaders can't keep up with him. Reed solves problems instantly that others struggle with, but he becomes more isolated, more detached from humanity. Obviously, the more knowledge he gains and the smarter and more full of himself, for lack of a better term, that he gets, the harder and more possible for it to happen is it's for him to connect with other people. He's literally in a place where the smartest people in the world are, and they are nothing to him. It's truly insane to think about. The core idea of this is kind of intelligence without morality. The story makes it clear that Reed's biggest flaw is not arrogance, it's the lack of emotional grounding. He truly thinks about the bigger picture more than he thinks about the outcome or anything the smaller details that will be affected by a big thing that gets changed. Doesn't naturally think about consequences, sees people as variables in equations rather than human beings with lives and goals and dreams and aspirations, you know what I mean? Obviously, there's a lot of parallels in present day Reed. We cut between young Reed and present day throughout this. Young Reed in the think tank, adult Reed making risky decisions. The connection, nothing has really changed. He's still pushing boundaries, ignoring emotional input, and prioritizing discovery over the safety of others and himself. Once again, obviously this led to the initial end zone disaster and then going back into there and almost leading Annihilus out. So it's showing that he repeatedly makes the same exact mistake and does not learn from it. This is kind of where Sue Storm becomes crucial. Obviously, she's been crucial this entire thing, but it's crucial to this characterization. She very much tries to humanize Reed, challenges his thinking, but Reed doesn't fully understand her concerns. The relationship becomes strained, not because of love, but because of fundamental differences in thinking. You do see this relatively often in mainline Fantastic Four comics. Obviously, Reed's biggest flaw is always he's wrapped up in his science and he's always thinking about the bigger picture. That's always been his biggest flaw. And in their relationship, their biggest problem has always kind of been these fundamental thinking differences rather than anything else, really. This is when we get introduced to, well, the villain of the story, or this arc, in my opinion, is very much Reed Richards. But introduced to kind of the counterbalance, someone who can seem to keep up with Reed. Her name is Mary Storm. Who is Mary Storm? Mary Storm is a child genius in the Think Tank program. One of the few, like I said, one of the few people who can intellectually match Reed Richards. Written mainly as a character device rather than a long-term recurring figure. Oh, just wanted to mention real quick, she is not related to Sue and Johnny Storm, despite the last name. It's just a coincidence in the Ultimate Universe. It's not a hint to anything future to come, and it's not a sign that they're related. I thought that at first it did seem weird that they would throw that last name on her, but that really doesn't mean anything. She is very important in my opinion because she represents a potential human connection for Reed. Someone who understands him intellectually still has emotional awareness. When Reed doesn't connect with her, it reinforces his emotional detachment isn't forced, it's chosen. She's almost, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's what Reed might become, but if you think about it as she's kind of to the point farther than Reed, it's kind of like that. The bottom line kind of is Mary Storm isn't a major Marvel character, but she's important because she shows that even when Reed has a chance to connect with someone like him, he still pulls away, which is a huge part of what makes him dangerous later on, what makes him the character that he will later on become. But I don't know. I always thought this was a really cool short story. Very much shows, especially with what ends up happening later on. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but later on in the Ultimate Fantastic Four series, and in an Ultimate Universe in a whole, what ends up happening, I think everything leading up to that, and then specifically these two stories, did such a good job building up Reed Richards as a character. So, for what eventually ends up happening. So I really, really enjoyed that. But that will do it for the Think Tank and the Ultimate Fantastic Four story arcs. Obviously, I said in the beginning we're going to do the first 6 books, but then I kind of was thinking more about it, and I thought it made more sense to do arcs, kind of like I do with the. Well, no, I guess in the mangas I do books, but it is easier in the mangas to just break it down by the book than it is to do the story arcs. Because, like, theoretically, I mean, I'm sure I can somewhere out there, but, like, my Marvel app, for example, say I want to do Civil War, for example. I type in Civil War, and I don't got well, no, that's not necessarily the best example, because that's its own comic run. The Clone Saga. I want to do Spider-Man the Clone Saga from the initiation of it all through the years and then all the way through the end of it. I can just type in the Clone Saga and it'll put every issue that is involving the Clone Saga into one page of things for me to read. I don't have anything like that for manga. I have apps for manga that I can go on there and read like I've been reading Naruto. Probably mispronounced that, sorry. And I read the first 60 books, but even on there, I'm not reading it book by book. I'm reading it chapter by chapter. It literally has, you're on chapter 2, you're on chapter 3. If I'm not paying close attention, I don't even know what book I'm on. I'm on book probably 35 to 40, but if I'm not paying attention, I have no idea. So it's a little hard to do that. It would be hard for me to do that for that. It is a little bit easier to do that with the comics. I probably am going to do that. Obviously, I said that I am going to be doing the Ultimate Fantastic Four continuation next week. And then, honestly, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm really, I haven't read the Ultimate comic runs in a while. And I was just recently, before this, rereading the X-Men one, and I love the X-Men run. So, I'll probably, maybe not X-Men, but I'll probably do another Ultimate story after this. I was thinking the Ultimates, but obviously they only got a 6-story run, and then there was the Ultimates 2, and then the Ultimate Avengers. So that's a little harder to read all of those stories in order, but I can absolutely do it. I very much enjoyed that, and I watched I think they were actually called Ultimate Avengers, the cartoons, movies when I was younger, but I didn't realize that they literally were just ripped from the Ultimates comic runs. which is really, really cool because that was always some of my favorite incarnations of those characters. But obviously, that's all Ultimates. That has nothing to do with Ultimate Fantastic Four, so I shouldn't be talking about it right now. That's not important. But like I said, that is going to do it for the Ultimate Fantastic Four for this week. Like I said, keep an eye out for all the episodes coming out. We got a bonus episode. We got blah, 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 blah. I've been promising all these episodes for a while, but after this episode's posted, you're also going to have in Full Metal Alchemist 1, books 4, 5, and 6. And then there's going to be a bonus episode that'll also going to be Full Metal Alchemist. It'll be books 7, 8, and 9. And then obviously the next week is also for manga is going to be another Full Metal Alchemist. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy the Full Metal Alchemist because it's my favorite. So we're going on a full binge of it. I've read I think I'm on book 25 of that. Maybe 22. I think I'm on book 22. So I'm pretty far in that series. So probably other than Dragon Ball, the farthest out of all of them. So I'm just going to keep running through it. We're not going to go all the way through the Ultimates run. We are going to probably stop after the next 3 story arcs. Actually, I'm thinking about it. We might do 3 weeks in a row with that because there's only, I think, 60 issues of the Ultimate Fantastic Four. And after I do next week's episode, it'll probably be like 3 or 4 arcs left. So I feel like we might as well, especially if you guys enjoy these episodes, we might as well just continue on with it. I think you guys are going to enjoy these episodes. I really, really enjoyed recording it, especially rereading these books to make my notes. That's always the most fun part for me. A lot of the time. Some of the time, especially because I don't necessarily have to sit there and like listen closely. I can kind of skim through it and it'll remind me of the story that I read. And sometimes I notice things I didn't notice the first time, which is really, really cool. But obviously we're going to be up on Spotify. Mondays come out every Monday and Friday. If you're hearing this, you should already know that. We're going to be up on YouTube. Episodes on YouTube come out generally the next day after they come up on Spotify, but sometimes 2 days, sometimes 3. We're going to be back on track coming up here soon after, I want to say Friday's episode. This is Monday's, so when Friday's episode comes out, Friday night will be the bonus episode. And then we should be back on track the following Monday. And everything should be right back on 8 a.m. uploads. But that is going to do it for this episode. I appreciate everybody listening, whether it's on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you listen. I don't care. I appreciate everybody who's listening. It means the absolute world to me. And I can't wait to see you guys next week. So thank you very much. And Dr. Panel out.